Rosa Martinez pulled her worn jacket tighter as she walked down the empty street. The textile factory had been especially hot today, and her back ached from bending over the sewing machines for 10 straight hours. All she wanted was to get home, take off her work boots, and maybe catch a few minutes of her favorite TV show before falling asleep. The October wind cut through her thin jacket, making her wish she had enough money for a proper winter coat. But every dollar went toward rent, groceries, and her kids' school supplies. Her oldest daughter needed new shoes soon, and her youngest son had been asking for a calculator for his math class. Rosa sighed, calculating how many extra hours she might need to work this month. As she turned the corner near the old construction site, something made her stop. The half-built warehouse had been sitting there for 2 years now, ever since the company ran out of money. The city kept promising to tear it down, but nothing ever happened. Most people avoided walking past it, especially at night. There were rumors about drug dealers and homeless camps hiding in the shadows, but tonight, Rosa heard something that made her heart skip. It sounded like crying. Not just any crying, but the kind of desperate, painful sobbing that comes from deep inside someone's soul. Rosa looked around the empty street. No one else was there to hear it. She could keep walking, mind her own business, get home safely. That would be the smart thing to do. The crying got louder. Rosa had always been the kind of person who couldn't ignore someone in pain. When she was little, she brought home stray cats and birds with broken wings. Her mother used to scold her, saying she couldn't save every hurt creature in the world. But Rosa never learned to walk away from suffering. She stepped carefully over the broken concrete and rusty metal scattered around the construction site. The security fence had gaps where people had cut through the chain link. Rosa squeezed through one of these openings, her jacket catching briefly on the sharp wire. The crying was coming from behind a pile of concrete blocks and old building materials. Rosa's heart pounded as she got closer. What if it was someone dangerous? What if this was a trap? But the sound was so full of pain and fear that she couldn't stop herself from looking. What she found made her gasp out loud. A young woman, maybe 19 or 20 years old, was crouched behind the concrete pile. Her long blonde hair was dirty and tangled. Her clothes were torn and stained. But what shocked Rosa most was how obviously pregnant the girl was, and how she was clutching her huge belly while tears streamed down her face. The girl looked up when she heard Rosa approach. Her eyes were wide with terror, like a trapped animal. She said something in a language Rosa didn't understand, but the fear in her voice was universal. Rosa held up her hands to show she meant no harm. "It's okay," she said softly. "I want to help you." The girl seemed to understand the tone, even if she didn't know the words. She grabbed Rosa's arm with surprising strength and spoke urgently in what sounded like Russian or maybe Polish. Rosa caught a few English words mixed in. Please, help, and baby. Then Rosa noticed the puddle of water around the girl's legs, and her eyes went wide. Her own 3 pregnancies came flooding back to her memory. This girl's water had broken. She was in labor, right here in the dirt behind an abandoned construction site. "Oh my God," Rosa whispered. "You're having the baby now?" The girl seemed to understand. She nodded frantically and then doubled over as another contraction hit her. Her scream echoed off the concrete walls around them. Rosa looked around desperately. They were completely alone. No one would hear them if they called for help. Her phone had barely any battery left, and she wasn't even sure if 911 could find them in this maze of construction debris. "Hospital," Rosa said, pointing toward the street. "We need to go to hospital," but the girl shook her head violently. "No hospital," she said in heavily accented English. "No police. Please, no." The terror in her voice was so intense that Rosa felt chills run down her spine. This wasn't just about being scared of medical bills or not having insurance. This girl was afraid of something much worse. Rosa knelt down next to her, trying to stay calm even though her own heart was racing. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Katya," the girl whispered between gasps of pain. "I'm Rosa, Katya. I had 3 babies myself. I know this is scary, but we need to get you help." Katya grabbed Rosa's hand and squeezed it tight. Please, she begged. They find me, they hurt baby, no hospital. Please help. Another contraction hit, stronger than before. Katya's scream was so loud that Rosa was sure someone would come running, but the street remained empty. It was just the two of them in this cold, dirty place that smelled of rust and old rain. Rosa's mind raced. Something was very wrong here. Normal pregnant women didn't hide behind construction sites to give birth. They didn't beg strangers not to call for help. Katya was running from something or someone, but right now none of that mattered. What mattered was that a baby was coming, whether they were ready or not. Okay, Rosa said, making a decision. That would change her life forever. No hospital. But I'm going to help you, okay? We're going to do this together. Katya's face showed relief mixed with pain. She nodded and squeezed Rosa's hand again. Rosa looked around at their surroundings. They had concrete blocks for walls, dirt for a floor, and nothing clean or sterile. Anywhere, she had delivered 3 babies herself, but always in a nice hospital with doctors and nurses and clean sheets. This was going to be like something from 100 years ago. When women gave birth wherever they happened to be when labor started, she took off her jacket and spread it on the ground like a blanket. It wasn't much, but it was better than the cold dirt. Then she tore strips from the bottom of her shirt to use as towels. Katya, look at me, Rosa said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. I'm going to stay with you. We're going to get through this. The girl's next contraction was so strong that she couldn't even scream. She just gripped Rosa's hands and squeezed until Rosa thought her fingers might break. When it passed, Katya looked at Rosa with eyes full of gratitude and something else. Something that looked like goodbye. Rosa didn't understand what that look meant, not yet. She was too focused on the impossible task ahead of them. But later she would remember that moment and realize that Katya already knew something that Rosa didn't. She knew that this birth would be the last thing she ever did. And she knew that Rosa was the kind of person who would do whatever it took to save her baby, even if it meant risking everything. The contractions were coming faster now. There was no turning back. In this dirty, forgotten corner of the city, 2 women who had been strangers just minutes before were about to bring a new life into the world together. Rosa had never been so scared in her entire life. She remembered her own deliveries, the clean hospital rooms, the beeping machines, the doctors and nurses who knew exactly what to do. But here, crouched behind concrete blocks with only the dim light from a distant street lamp, she felt completely lost. Katya's contractions were getting stronger and closer together. Rosa could see the pain washing over the young woman's face in waves. Between contractions, Katya would try to catch her breath, but before she could fully recover, another wave of pain would hit her. How long have you been having these pains? Rosa asked, though she wasn't sure Katya would understand. Katya held up her fingers. Since morning, she managed to say in broken English, but now very bad. Rosa's heart sank. If Katya had been in labor since morning, this baby was definitely coming tonight. There was no time to get her somewhere safe, even if the girl would agree to go. The October night was getting colder. Rosa could see her own breath in the air, and she worried about what would happen to a newborn baby in these conditions. She took off her sweater and added it to the makeshift bed she'd created with her jacket. Katya, I need to check how close the baby is, Rosa said gently. She had watched the nurses do this with her own deliveries. Though she'd never done it herself, Katya nodded, understanding more from Rosa's tone and gestures than from her words. What Rosa saw made her realize they were running out of time fast. This baby was coming within the hour, whether they were ready or not. Rosa tried to remember everything she'd seen during her own births and everything she'd heard from other mothers. She knew babies needed to breathe right away. She knew the cord had to be cut. She knew there would be a lot of blood. But knowing these things in theory was very different from actually doing them with her own hands. Okay, Katya, when the next pain comes, I need you to push, okay? Push like you're trying to have a bowel movement. Katya looked confused by the words, but when the contraction hit, Rosa showed her what to do. Push. Push now. Katya pushed with all her strength, her face turning red from the effort. When the contraction ended, she collapsed back against the concrete, breathing hard. Good, very good, Rosa said, trying to sound encouraging. You're doing great. But inside, Rosa was panicking. She could see the top of the baby's head now, covered in dark hair. This was really happening. In a few minutes, there would be a tiny human being depending on them for survival. The next contraction came quickly. Rosa coached Katya through it, remembering how the nurses had told her to breathe during her own deliveries. Breathe, breathe, now push. With each push, more of the baby's head appeared. Rosa found herself crying without realizing it. Despite the terrible circumstances, watching a baby being born was still the most incredible thing she'd ever seen. I can see the head, Rosa said excitedly. Katya, your baby is almost here. But when she looked at Katya's face, Rosa felt a chill of fear. The young woman was getting paler by the minute. There was more blood than Rosa remembered from her own births. Too much blood. Katya, stay with me, Rosa said urgently. Look at me. Your baby needs you to stay strong. Katya's eyes focused on Rosa's face. With tremendous effort, she smiled. Is baby okay? The baby is perfect, Rosa said, though. She had no way of knowing for sure. One more big push and your baby will be here. The final contraction came with incredible force. Katya pushed with every bit of strength she had left. And suddenly the baby slipped out into Rosa's waiting hands. For a moment, the world stood completely still. Rosa held a tiny, slippery baby girl in her hands. The infant was purple and covered in blood, and for a terrifying second she wasn't breathing. Rosa's mind went blank with panic. Then, remembering something she'd seen on TV, she turned the baby upside down and patted her back firmly. Nothing happened. She patted harder. Suddenly, the baby let out a weak cry, then a stronger one. Her color changed from purple to pink, and she began to move her tiny arms and legs. She's breathing, Rosa cried. Katya, you have a beautiful baby girl. Rosa wrapped the baby in her torn shirt and looked up at Katya to share the joy of the moment. But what she saw made her heart stop. Katya was staring at her baby with eyes full of love, but also with a look that Rosa would never forget. It was the look of someone saying goodbye. Katya, Rosa said softly. Are you okay? Instead of answering, Katya reached into her jacket pocket with shaking hands. She pulled out a small, worn photograph and pressed it into Rosa's palm. Rosa could barely see it in the dim light, but it looked like an older man and woman standing in front of a small house. Grandmama? Dedushka, Katya whispered, pointing to the photo. Then she did something that confused Rosa completely. Despite having just given birth, despite being weak and bleeding, Katya struggled to sit up. She reached for her baby, and Rosa thought she wanted to hold her. Instead, Katya placed the infant in Rosa's arms and gently pushed Rosa's hands away from her. No, Rosa said, trying to give the baby back. This is your daughter. You need to hold her. But Katya shook her head. With what seemed like her last bit of strength, she pointed toward the street and then back at the baby. Her meaning was unmistakable, even without words. Katya, no, Rosa said, beginning to understand what was happening. You can't ask me to do this. She's your baby. Katya grabbed Rosa's arm one last time. Her grip was getting weaker, but her eyes were fierce with determination. Please, she whispered. Save ... save my baby. Rosa felt tears streaming down her face as she held the newborn close to her chest. The baby was so small, so perfect, so innocent. She had no idea that her world had just changed forever in the space of an hour. I don't know how, Rosa whispered back. I don't know what to do. But even as she said it, Rosa knew she would figure it out somehow. Looking down at the tiny face peeking out from her makeshift blanket, she felt something shift inside her heart. This wasn't just any baby anymore. This was a child who had been entrusted to her care by a dying mother. Katya smiled one last time. A smile of relief and gratitude. Then her eyes closed and her breathing became shallow and slow. Rosa sat there in the cold dirt, holding a newborn baby whose mother was slipping away beside her. She had no idea what she was going to do next, but she knew one thing for certain. She would not let this child suffer the same fate as her mother. The baby stirred in her arms and made a small sound. Rosa looked down at her and whispered, "Don't worry, little one. I'm going to take care of you." At that moment, Rosa's old life ended and a new, dangerous journey began. Rosa didn't sleep at all that night. She sat in her small apartment, holding the baby girl and staring at the photograph Katya had given her. The infant was so tiny, so helpless. Every few hours, she would cry for milk, and Rosa would give her sugar water from a spoon, the only thing she could think of until she could get proper baby formula. Her own children were staying at their grandmother's house for the week, which felt like a miracle now. Rosa couldn't imagine trying to explain why there was suddenly a newborn baby in their home. As the sun came up, Rosa knew she had to go back to the construction site. She couldn't leave Katya's body there for someone else to find. The young woman deserved better than that. And maybe Rosa thought she could find some clues about who Katya really was and where she came from. Rosa wrapped the baby in a soft blanket and put her in an old basket. The infant was sleeping peacefully, unaware that her whole world had changed in one terrible night. When Rosa arrived at the construction site, her heart broke all over again. Katya looked so young, lying there, younger than Rosa's oldest daughter. In the morning light, Rosa could see things she'd missed in the darkness. The girl's clothes were expensive once, but now they were dirty and torn. Her shoes were worn down to almost nothing, like she'd been walking for a very long time. Rosa knelt beside Katya and whispered a prayer. Then with trembling hands she began looking through the girl's pockets for anything that might help her understand. What had happened, what she found, made her stomach turn cold with fear. Hidden in Katya's jacket was a small piece of paper with an address written in careful handwriting. But it wasn't a local address. The writing said Volgograd, Russia, at the bottom. There was also a phone number that started with numbers Rosa didn't recognize. In another pocket, Rosa found something even more disturbing. It was a business card for something called International Opportunities, Inc. The card promised good jobs in America for young women. Education assistance available? But it was what Rosa found sewn into the lining of Katya's jacket that made everything clear. There were several more photographs, all showing the same older couple from the picture Katya had given her. In one photo, they were standing with a younger version of Katya, maybe when she was 16 or 17. All three of them were smiling and looked happy. On the back of this photo, someone had written in English, "Mama and Papa waiting for Katya to come home from America." Rosa's hands started shaking as she realized what this meant. Katya hadn't come to America by choice. Someone had tricked her, promised her education and opportunities, then brought her here for something terrible instead. Rosa had heard stories like this on the news, but they always seemed like something that happened to other people in faraway places. She never imagined she would hold the evidence in her own hands. The baby started crying, and Rosa quickly picked her up. Looking down at the innocent face, Rosa felt anger burning in her chest. This child was the daughter of someone who had been stolen from her family and brought to a foreign country to suffer. "Your mama was trying to protect you," Rosa whispered to the baby. She knew something bad was going to happen to her, but she made sure you would be safe. Rosa carefully put all of Katya's belongings in her purse. She knew she should call the police, but Katya's terrified words from the night before kept echoing in her mind. "No police! They find me! They hurt baby!" What if the people who had hurt Katya were still looking for her? What if they found out about the baby? Rosa had watched enough crime shows to know that sometimes the police couldn't protect people from dangerous criminals. And what would happen to the baby while the investigation went on? She would disappear into the foster care system, and Katya's parents in Russia might never know they had a granddaughter. Rosa made a decision that she knew was risky, maybe even illegal. She would not call the authorities yet. First, she would try to contact Katya's family herself, but when she got home and tried calling the Russian phone number, all she heard was a recording in a language she couldn't understand. The number on the business card was disconnected. Rosa felt more lost than ever. She spent the day taking care of the baby and thinking about what to do. She bought formula, diapers, and tiny clothes from the store, paying with money she had been saving for her son's calculator. Every time someone asked about the baby, Rosa said she was babysitting for a friend that evening. Rosa's neighbor, Mrs. Chun, knocked on her door. Mrs. Chun was an older Chinese woman who had immigrated to America many years ago. She often helped Rosa with translation when official papers came in English that was too complicated. "Rosa, I heard crying last night," Mrs. Chun said. "Is everything okay?" Rosa hesitated, then made another life-changing decision. She invited Mrs. Chun inside and told her everything that had happened. She showed her the photographs and the papers she'd found with Katya. Mrs. Chun listened quietly, her face growing more serious with every detail. When Rosa finished, Mrs. Chun was quiet for a long time. "Rosa," she finally said, "this girl was trafficked." "You know what that means?" Rosa nodded. She had learned the word from TV news stories, though she'd never fully understood how horrible it really was until now. "The people who did this to her, they are very dangerous," Mrs. Chun continued. "If they find out about the baby, they might try to take her or hurt you for helping." "Then what should I do?" Rosa asked desperately. "I can't just let this baby disappear into the system. Her grandparents don't even know she exists." Mrs. Chun picked up the photograph of the older couple and studied it carefully. "I have idea," she said slowly. "But it will be very dangerous and probably illegal." Rosa felt her heart pounding. "What kind of idea?" "I know people," Mrs. Chun sighed quietly. "People who help others when the law cannot help them. People who understand what it's like to be far from family, in danger, with nowhere to turn." She looked directly into Rosa's eyes. "But if you do this thing, your life will never be the same. You could go to prison. You could lose your own children. Are you sure this baby is worth that risk?" Rosa looked down at the infant sleeping peacefully in her arms. The baby's tiny fingers were wrapped around Rosa's thumb, holding on tight. In that moment, Rosa knew she would do anything to protect this child. "Yes," she said firmly. "She's worth it." Mrs. Chun nodded slowly. "Then tomorrow we begin a very dangerous journey. But tonight you should say goodbye to your old life. Because the woman who keeps this baby safe will not be the same Rosa who found her mother yesterday." Rosa spent that night holding the baby and looking at the photographs of Katya's parents. Somewhere in Russia, an older couple was probably still waiting for their daughter to call, not knowing she would never come home. But maybe, if Rosa was brave enough and lucky enough, they would get to meet their granddaughter instead. It wasn't the same as getting their daughter back, but it was something. And sometimes Rosa thought something was better than nothing at all. The next morning, Mrs. Chun arrived at Rosa's apartment with a woman Rosa had never seen before. She was tall and thin, with graying hair and kind eyes that seemed to see everything. She spoke with a slight accent that Rosa couldn't place. "This is Dr. Petrova," Mrs. Chun said quietly. "She used to be a pediatric nurse in her home country. She will make sure the baby is healthy for travel." Dr. Petrova examined the infant carefully while Rosa watched nervously. The woman's hands were gentle but professional as she checked the baby's breathing, heart rate, and reflexes. "She is small but strong," Dr. Petrova said finally. "Born maybe 6 pounds. She will need special care, but she can survive a long journey." "If we are careful," Rosa felt both relief and terror. Part of her had hoped the doctor would say the baby was too weak to travel, giving Rosa an excuse to back out of this dangerous plan. But another part of her knew that every day they waited made it more likely that someone would discover what they were doing over the next few days. Rosa learned that Mrs. Chun's people were part of an underground network that had been helping immigrants and refugees for decades. They were teachers, nurses, truck drivers, shop owners, ordinary people who had all experienced what it meant to be powerless in a foreign country. "We call ourselves the Bridge," explained a man named Victor, who spoke with a heavy Russian accent. "We help people cross from danger to safety, from separation to family." Victor had been in America for 15 years, but he still sent money back to his elderly parents in Moscow. When Mrs. Chun told him about Katya and her baby, he immediately volunteered to help. "This girl, she could have been my sister," he said, looking at the photographs Rosa had found. These grandparents, they could be my own parents. We do not let families stay broken when we can fix them. The plan they developed was more complicated than Rosa had imagined. The baby couldn't simply be put on a plane to Russia. She had no passport, no birth certificate, no legal documentation at all. Taking her across international borders would require help from people in several different countries. First, we get her to Canada, Victor explained, spreading a map across Rosa's kitchen table. I have cousin there who runs shipping business. Baby travels hidden in truck with legal cargo. Rosa's stomach turned at the thought of putting a newborn in the back of a truck for hours. What if she cries? What if she gets cold? I go with her, said a young woman named Lucia, who worked as a nanny for wealthy families. I know how to care for babies during travel. We make special hiding place with heat, air, everything she needs. From Canada, the plan got even more complex. The baby would travel with a flight attendant named Dmitri, who made regular trips between Toronto and Moscow. He had been smuggling letters and small packages to separated families for years. I have special bag, Dmitri explained. Airport security. Knows me? Trusts me? Baby sleeps during flight with medicine to keep her quiet. Rosa was horrified. You want to drug her? Dr. Petrova quickly reassured her. Not drugs. Natural herbs that help babies sleep peacefully. Same thing hospitals use? For very young children during medical procedures. Completely safe. Each person in the network would only know their small part of the journey. If someone got caught, they couldn't reveal the whole plan. Rosa would only travel for the first part, to make sure the baby was safely handed over to. Lucia, after that you go home, Victor said firmly. You return to your normal life, your children, your job. You know nothing about what happens next. But Rosa shook her head. I can't just hand her over to strangers and walk away. Katya trusted me to keep her baby safe. Rosa, Mrs. Chun said gently, if you try to go all the way to Russia, you will definitely be caught. Then baby ends up in government hands anyway, and you go to prison. Your own children lose their mother. Rosa knew they were right, but the thought of letting go felt impossible. Over the past week, she had fallen completely in love with this tiny girl. She woke up every few hours to feed her, sang her lullabies, and felt her heart melt every time the baby gripped her finger with those tiny hands. I understand, said Lucia, seeing Rosa's pain. I have baby sister back in El Salvador. I cannot see her, but I send money, I write letters. Love does not need to be in same place. The hardest part was preparing the baby for the journey, Dr. Petrova taught Rosa how to mix special formula that would provide extra nutrition during travel. They practiced keeping the baby calm and quiet during the day, so she would be used to sleeping for long periods. Rosa also had to create a cover story for her own disappearance. She told her supervisor at the textile factory that she had a family emergency and needed a week off. She arranged for her children to stay with their grandmother for an extended visit. What if something goes wrong? Rosa asked Victor during one of their planning meetings. What if you get caught? What if the baby gets sick? Victor's expression grew serious. Rosa, I will not lie to you. This is dangerous for everyone. People have gone to prison for less than what we are doing. But sometimes doing the right thing means taking big risks. He picked up the photograph of Katya's parents and studied it carefully. Look at these faces. These people lost their daughter forever. Maybe they think she forgot about them. Maybe they think she chose to stay in America. They will die not knowing what really happened to her. Rosa felt tears in her eyes as Victor continued. But this baby, she is their second chance. She is proof that their daughter never forgot them, that she loved them so much she died trying to send them something precious. 3 weeks after that terrible night at the construction site, Rosa found herself sitting in the passenger seat of Victor's truck, holding the baby one last time. They were parked at a rest stop near the Canadian border, waiting for Lucia to arrive. Rosa had barely slept in days. Every time she heard a car door slam or saw a police officer, her heart started racing. She kept expecting someone to knock on her door and demand to know where the baby had come from, The baby had grown noticeably in the past 3 weeks. She was more alert now, sometimes following Rosa's face with her eyes. When she smiled, which was happening more often, Rosa felt like her heart might break from love and sadness. "She knows you," Victor said quietly, watching Rosa stroke the baby's cheek. "She will remember your kindness, even if she cannot remember your face." When Lucia arrived, Rosa almost changed her mind. The young woman seemed so small, so young, to be responsible for something so important. But when Lucia took the baby in her arms, her confidence was obvious. She had done this before. "I promise you," Lucia said, looking directly into Rosa's eyes, "I will protect her with my life. Just like you have been doing." Rosa kissed the baby's forehead one last time and whispered, "Find your family, little one. Your mama wanted you to be with people who will love you." As Victor's truck disappeared into the night, carrying the baby toward an uncertain but hopeful future, Rosa sat alone in the dark parking lot and cried harder than she had ever cried. In her life, she had just given up the most precious thing in the world, but she knew she had done the right thing. Somewhere in Russia, an older couple was about to receive the greatest gift they could imagine. And somewhere in heaven, maybe, Katya was finally at peace. For 3 months, Rosa lived in a constant state of fear and hope. Every morning, she woke up wondering if today would be the day she got arrested. Every evening, she checked her phone desperately for any news about the baby's journey. The messages came in pieces, always from different phone numbers, always brief and coded. Package delivered to first stop safely. Then 2 weeks later, goods transferred to air transport without problems. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, item arrived at final destination, all parties satisfied. Rosa knew this last message meant the baby had reached Russia, but she had no idea what happened next. Had they found Katya's parents? Was the baby healthy? Did the grandparents accept this unexpected gift, or were they too shocked and confused to understand what had happened? Rosa tried to return to her normal life. She went back to work at the textile factory, picked up her children from their grandmother's house, and attempted to act like nothing had changed, but everything had changed. She jumped every time she heard sirens. She avoided making eye contact with police officers. At night, she lay awake thinking about a tiny baby girl somewhere in a foreign country. Her children noticed something was different about their mother, but they couldn't figure out what. Rosa had always been cheerful and talkative, but now she seemed distant and worried all the time. "Mama, are you sick?" her youngest son asked one evening while she was making dinner. "No, Mio," Rosa said, forcing a smile. "Mama is just tired from work," but she wasn't just tired. She was carrying a secret so heavy it felt like it might crush her. She had broken laws she didn't even fully understand. She had trusted strangers with something more precious than her own life, and she had no idea if any of it had been worth it. Then, 4 months after that terrible night at the construction site, Rosa received a phone call that changed everything. She was folding laundry when her phone rang. The number was international, starting with codes she didn't recognize. For a moment, she considered not answering, but something made her pick up. "Hello?" she said cautiously. "Is this Rosa Martinez?" asked a woman's voice with a heavy accent. The connection was poor, making the voice sound far away and scratchy. Rosa's heart started pounding. "Who is this? My name is Svetlana Volkov. I am ... I am grandmother of baby girl. You know my granddaughter?" Rosa sank into a chair, her legs suddenly too weak to support her. "Is she ... Is the baby okay?" "She is beautiful," Svetlana said, and Rosa could hear tears in her voice. "She is healthy, she is growing, but we need to know. Please, can you tell us about our Katya?" For the next hour, Rosa told Katya's grandmother everything she could remember about that night. She described how brave Katya had been, how she had fought to protect her baby even while she was dying. She explained about the photographs Katya had carried, and how her last words had been about getting the baby to her grandparents. Svetlana cried openly as Rosa spoke. "We wondered why Katya stopped calling," she said. "The people who took her, they said she was working and studying, that she was too busy to contact us, but we knew something was wrong. A mother's heart always knows. She never forgot you, Rosa said firmly. Everything she did was to protect her baby and get her back to you. You saved our granddaughter's life, Svetlana said. You risked everything for a stranger's child. How can we ever thank you? Rosa wiped tears from her own eyes. Take care of her. Love her. Tell her about her mother when she's old enough to understand. That's all the thanks I need. Svetlana promised to send photographs as the baby grew up. She said they had named her Nadezhda, which meant hope in Russian. She is our hope that good people still exist in the world, Svetlana explained, but Rosa's relief was short-lived. 2 weeks after the phone call from Russia, there was a knock on her door that she had been dreading for months. 2 men in suits stood on her doorstep, holding badges that identified them as federal agents. Rosa's blood turned to ice, but she tried to act calm. "Ma'am, we're investigating the disappearance of a young woman," one of the agents said. "We have reason to believe you may have information about her whereabouts." They showed Rosa a photograph. It was Katya, but this picture was different from the ones Rosa had found. In this photo, Katya looked younger, happier, like she was posing for a school picture. "I've never seen her before," Rosa lied, proud that her voice stayed steady. The agents asked to search her apartment. They looked through everything, her closets, her kitchen cabinets, even her children's toy boxes. They found nothing, because Rosa had been careful to get rid of anything connected to that night, but they didn't leave. For weeks, Rosa felt like she was being watched. Sometimes she saw the same car parked across from her apartment building. Her phone made strange clicking sounds during calls. Her supervisor at work mentioned that some men had come by asking questions about her. Rosa realized that even though the baby was safe, her own troubles were just beginning. The people who had trafficked Katya were still out there, and they were looking for answers about what had happened to her. One evening, Mrs. Chun came to visit. She looked worried and spoke in whispers. "Rosa, you need to be very careful," she said. "I heard from Victor that some dangerous people are asking questions in the community. They know someone helped that girl, and they're trying to find out who. What should I do?" Rosa asked, feeling more scared than ever. "Act normal. Don't change your routine. Don't talk to anyone about what happened. And if anyone threatens you, or your children, you call Victor immediately." Rosa followed Mrs. Chen's advice, but living in constant fear was exhausting. She started having nightmares about men breaking into her apartment. She made her children promise never to walk home alone after school. She looked over her shoulder everywhere she went. Then, 6 months after the baby's journey to Russia, something unexpected happened. Rosa was watching the evening news when she saw a report that made her gasp out loud. Federal agents today arrested 15 people in connection with an international human trafficking ring, the news anchor said. The organization allegedly brought young women from Eastern Europe to the United States under false pretenses, then forced them into illegal activities. The report showed several men being led away in handcuffs. Rosa recognized one of them immediately. It was the address from the business card she had found in Katya's jacket. Over the following weeks, more details came out. The trafficking ring had been under investigation for years, but they had finally gathered enough evidence to make arrests. Several young women had been rescued, and more were being located in other cities. Rosa realized that Katya had probably been just one victim among many. Her death had been tragic, but it had also led to her baby's freedom and eventually to justice for other girls who might have suffered the same fate. A year later, Rosa received a package from Russia. Inside were dozens of photographs of a beautiful little girl with dark hair and bright eyes. In some pictures, she was sitting with an elderly couple who looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. The last photograph showed the little girl taking her first steps, reaching toward the camera with a huge smile on her face. On the back, someone had written in careful English, "Nadezhda's first steps. She is walking toward a future full of love. Thank you for making this possible." The Volkov family. Rosa put the photograph on her refrigerator, right next to pictures of her own children. Sometimes visitors asked about the little girl in the photo, and Rosa would say she was the daughter of a friend who lived far away. wasn't exactly a lie. Rosa would always consider herself connected to this child, this little girl who had changed her life in ways she never could have imagined. She had learned that sometimes doing the right thing meant breaking rules. She had discovered that love could grow instantly between strangers. And she had found out that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when someone needed help. Most importantly, Rosa had kept a promise to a dying mother. Somewhere in Russia, a little girl named Hope was growing up surrounded by family who loved her, never knowing how many people had risked everything to bring her home.